Well, propaganda is around us as never before in North America. I think the pinnacle of propaganda was in Nazi Germany. But what I think we need to do is to recognize when propaganda makes its appearance. I'm going to talk about Jacques Ellul's contributions to our understanding of propaganda. And for the very first thing is we're going to need to look at the different definitions of propaganda. But there's the sense in which that is in common use, the sense in which I will use the term. There's a sense that in which Ellul uses the term, which is close, and a special sense that Ellul has that makes us alert to forms of propaganda that are not generally recognized. And it's a great job to try to synthesize the many different things he says, and I'm not going to be able to do that. What I want to do, though, is to say enough to indicate the directions in which his thought goes. And I want to say a little bit about some of the ways in which propaganda exists that are not recognized by people that they, I want to talk about propaganda as awareness, journalistic techniques that tend to skew people's thinking. And then I want to talk about how to respond to that. And when I talk about how to respond to that, I will also appeal to Jacques Ellul, not so much in his work on propaganda as in his theological stuff. And I hope to end up with a very tiny little example of propaganda by Nestle about bottled water that took place in a newspaper called the Globe and Mail. And I wanted to say how I responded to that and some of the things that went behind that. But it's in these little things that you find propaganda. I immediately recall how Nobecourt, talking about the propaganda, Nazi propaganda in France, in occupied France, said that the one propaganda that they had no defense against was les petits faits, these little, tiny little factoids that would be put at the end of articles. So like 2 million American recruits were rejected because of physical deficiencies, venereal disease, drunkenness, so, I mean, little factoids like that, and they abound, especially when we're confronted with so many different media sources that are actually, that are governed by certain interests. And where it matters, things are skewed in the direction that favors those interests. So let's look at this outline here. There's Ellul's definition of propaganda compared to other understandings of the term. First of all, what are the other understandings of the term? There are two main accepted definitions of propaganda in our language. One is neutral. That is to say, it's trying to persuade, it's an organized attempt to influence people. It's one of these many different definitions. So, large numbers of people. So, this can be good or bad. You can be using that. You can be trying to raise funds for a hospital. You're trying to persuade people. You're using examples. And this is, propaganda is not bad if you use it that way. But most people don't think of it that way. They think of it in terms of some form of deception, some deceit, misrepresentation, and that's what we have to look out for in the meaning of the term. Now, Jacques Ellul has a special definition of propaganda, where propaganda is an attempt, communication for the purpose of gaining power over others, by manipulation. So those are the elements that go into his definition that's close to our own understanding, but it's, I think, a very significant addition to be thought about in many different contexts. The person who's propagating ideas that she sincerely believes in and is not trying to manipulate, but trying to bring the word to be, that's not propaganda in his sense of the term. Now, but Ellul also has an idea of total propaganda, and apparent contradictions in what he says stem from which definition he's impliedly using, which is not always the same. Now, when here are some of the interesting ideas that Ellul gives us with regard to propaganda. What is the role of the propagandee? People are, since the French Revolution, people are uncertain about what kinds of things to believe in, and they're looking at with the development of mass communications. Again, the individuals don't get their information from sources that they know and live with. They get their information from mass-produced vehicles of information. So there's a lot of doubt around, and the world is very complex, and people are, in democracies, feel that they should now, as responsible people, have some opinion about world affairs. And it's very difficult to get a good opinion, but so you have those media, Fox News in particular, which give people a simplified version. It's not necessarily the truth, but it gives people something that they can get onto, and since other people are reading the same, viewing the same thing, reading the same materials, then they don't have to do any more thinking. They can feel that they're responsible people by adopting the generally disseminated view. And that's a big danger, and that's why in the second point there, well, there's the idea of the first point there, the role of the propagandee, and that is that if we're going to have some defense against propaganda, people have to learn more to be willing to actually question their sources of information and try to not pretend to know things that are merely parroted just because other people happen to hold those opinions. To try to, at least in some areas, get some anchor in reputable sources. Now, that's one of Ellul's contributions is looking at the propagandee, looking at the ways in which people may become inauthentic in their lives by not really stretching to get at truth, but being content with accepting some easily passed off facsimile. So he's throwing it onto people that there's a certain obligation there on the propagandee. He also has the idea of pre-propaganda. It's a novel idea, according to which propaganda is only successful because people have certain myths, images about how things are. And it's because they have these myths, such as the grandeur of France, the American way of life, the progress. There are certain myths which he defines as having being provided the framework within which all other beliefs about the world are contained. So you have these different myths: the myth of the nation, the myth of the race is another one. Under Nazi Germany, an all-encompassing way of looking at the world. So pre-propaganda, these myths don't happen overnight. That's why he calls it pre-propaganda. These things upon which can serve as anchors for propaganda, they built up over time through what he calls sociological propaganda. Ellul is quite famous in his book, from his book, about dealing with categories of propaganda. On the left-hand side, are what people usually think of when they think of propaganda: political, agitated, vertical, and irrational. On the right-hand side, there's the sociological, integrative, horizontal, and rational. And the sociological has to do, but I'm just compressing very much the definition, but sociological is not, is self-perpetuating among people. It's not continuously directed by somebody or by an organization. The political is directed by an organization. That's what's, and agitative is trying to arouse people. Integrative is trying to get people to cohere. Agitative tends to separate, tends to bring, for example, Lenin's propaganda against the Tsar, getting people against the Tsar, agitating against the Tsar. Integrated propaganda tries to give people myths that hold them together. George Washington and the cherry tree, or whatever it may be, whatever myths you make up that give people a sense that they cohere as a nation. And there's a lot of things that people like to believe that aren't necessarily true, but it's impossible to try to attack them when they are so well established within a community. You're not going to persuade people about it. Then there's a vertical, there's a horizontal that is communicating in small groups rather than one single authority on top. The last one is irrational and rational. The rational propaganda is not usually thought of as propaganda because people think of reason and science as the truth. In fact, when Ellul talks about rational propaganda, he's talking about the use of quasi-science to impress upon people who are impressible by virtue of their belief in rationality, but it does not give them they don't have the science to understand it scientifically, to understand the messages scientifically. They're given science, but skewed science, and it's impressionistic. It's rational propaganda, but it's impressionistic rational rather than actual rational. Okay, so there's also Ellul's contributions on truth and timeliness. And here he brought out very well that propaganda very often it brings in the truth, but it's propaganda in the negative sense because it's misleading. You can use it's the selection of facts that can be so misleading. So it's not that something can be objectively true in a literal sense, that what you say is true, but what you say that is true can be so selected as to give a wrong impression. So if all you talk about is giving facts about earthquakes and coups and so on in the third world, people get a certain impression, which is not that of the reality of actually quite happy people getting along together who may need, in fact, better markets for their products and so on and so on. Now, lastly, his paradox is that propaganda is necessary for democracy, and yet is the antithesis of democracy. He looked at how the world was. He saw that people, in fact, because they are favorably disposed to propaganda, because they want to believe things that are presented simply, because they want to feel justified, they have to be reached by simple presentations. It's almost as if under George W. Bush, it's almost as if they were reading from an Ellulian playbook here. That when they I think Wolfowitz said this, that we couldn't give the complicated truth, so we had to get people to go to war on the basis of weapons of mass destruction and other things that people could relate to. You know, people understand. Okay? So the paradox is that propaganda is necessary for democracy, and yet is the antithesis of democracy. 5 minutes, okay. So the propaganda has become, the problem has become starker in today's world. All right. There is today, I have to acknowledge, as a favorable side to it, that offsetting state and corporate propaganda is the development today of social media and WikiLeaks. In other words, it would be more difficult today to have the kind of build-up that the Bush administration had for the war in Iraq back in 2002, February 5th, 2003. So one of the things is that the use of astroturf, turning now to how propaganda, how we have propaganda served to us by means that we don't recognize. One of them is astroturf, so-called, because it's fake grassroots. Fake grassroots that are, and so fake grassroots, the example of that is behind the scenes, Koch brothers supporting the Tea Party. So you get in front, you have people who are sincerely believing the things that they're presenting, and they have more credibility than if the corporation were upfront about its supporting of these ideas. So you have corporations who are, individuals who are supporting those people who believe in sincerely in what they're saying. So the deception comes in the deception comes in people not knowing the source behind the presentations that they're getting. I talk here about my claims are that Ellul showed great insight into the propaganda phenomenon. His ideas are impertinent today as ever. His views in propaganda need to be assessed in the light of his other writings, and that comes in connection with trying to combat propaganda. In-kind responses to unethical propaganda are likely to be wrong. And there's not a technical fix to the problem, but a searching assessment of our values and responsibilities is needed. So I'm just going to show you some examples of how easy it is to be taken in by propaganda, how difficult it is to sometimes see propaganda that's thrown at us. And a lot of it on today's world is negative imagery. Here's the example I want to show you. It was on the screen of my computer the weekend before the last election, Tuesday, November the 4th. You had this thing on the screen, Obama Ant case under investigation. You have, this is just before the election, you have Obama looking as though he's O.J. Simpson, a sort of criminal, and right, giving you that impression is the image of a police car there. New scrutiny on illegal immigrants. Now it turns out, and you go through this story and you find that, this is a close-up of it, you go through the story and you find that it's a kind of a routine thing of not renewing the permit to be in the country. This is no doubt a file photo, but it's made to give a wrong impression. You know, everything there I take it to be true. Everything they say is true, but giving a wrong impression. At the end of the story, they disclose that if you look there, Onyango's refusal to leave the country would represent an administrative non-criminal violation of immigration law, meaning such cases are handled outside the criminal court system. Estimates vary, but many experts believe there are more than 10 million such immigrants in the United States. So you've got you've got a picture that gives you a wrong impression. There's nothing stated that is false, but you've got a non-story presented as a story. and all I'm saying is that these kinds of things we're pretty, looking at the population, that we're pretty helpless against. And when you have the Citizens United case, whereby corporations can engage in political advertising in support of candidates, and billions of dollars can be spent, you no longer have really a democracy. And I'm out of time, and I'm sorry that I couldn't make this more concise, but I'll stop there and tell you.
Thank you, Randal, and thankfully we have this question and answer time where you can follow up and follow some threads that you maybe had to leave out there at the end.
That should just fear-mongering there is, you may remember this kind of thing. And the problem is, people forget it. We're going through the same thing with regard to Iran. You know, we can easily manipulate our opinions about Iran now, because people forget. You know, we're in this audience. I can remind you of how things were presented before deceptively, but to remind everybody would cost so much money. That really you see how finances have so much big an impact on not the facts, but which facts people choose to are able to see and to remember.
Good. Right, Ling.
As I read Ellul, his ultimate suggestion is to draw from the sphere in which these messages are propagated.
Well,
Do you agree with
yes
that?
and no. Yes and no. I see Ellul as with Charbonneau engaging in a discussion group, not ignoring the media, but trying to.
But let's say you're living in a world that has Fox and it's clones now, and they're echo chambers that are clones. So
That are what?
it's almost clones.
Clones, okay, clones.
Yeah. And also clones.
Yeah.
And they are tremendously powerful in propagating points of view. It seems to me you can inoculate yourself from them and go off and talk to, let's say, friends in your neighborhood, but that leaves the phenomenon still in existence, and in our case, it could well end up governing all three branches of government. So what do we do?
Well, okay.
See, I'm not going to talk on Fox News or challenge it, or it's closed to me anyway. I'm just saying,
I think if they asked me to go on Fox News, I think I would say no, because I don't think I can handle Bill O'Reilly. But somebody who could handle him. Go and see the movie at Fox if you haven't already seen it. Jeremy Glick in there has that fantastic exchange, and it shows how the bullying doesn't succeed against Jeremy Glick. It's just marvelous. Any of you seen Out Fox? Well, there's something. Run to your nearest distributor or go online for Out Fox and look at it, because it just shows so well the techniques Fox uses to influence people. So, but I don't see Ellul as saying we must abdicate. We can't all watch what's being foisted on people. We can form groups, and particularly now we have the internet. That's why Ellul is more relevant than ever. We have the internet. We can have groups of people with focusing on just the kinds of things that are there to manipulate our opinions.
I'll do my best with the four hands that are up now. So we'll start here.
Yeah, I agree with you on that part. Ellul, I think, in propaganda, advocated for the fact that you can't get out of being propagandized. That you have to, it's almost better to embrace it in such a way that so that you can understand what everybody else understands. I think even in propaganda, he said, go see a movie, because then you'll understand what it's like to see a movie. And you'll understand the propaganda that perpetuates from the act of being propagandized. But on that note, my question is really like, how do you, besides recognizing it and showing us images, how do you get away from, let's say, being affected by propaganda, or is that even possible, really? how do you do that?
And I think one way you do it is by talking to other people who are like-minded in the sense of being willing to criticize and ask for sources and communicate the whole educational process that goes on about looking at techniques of propaganda, and so that people will look a little more at where things are, what their sources of information are. But that's not enough, because the sociological propaganda takes into account all of the worship we have of technology. These feed into technology is upheld by myths that are supported by sociological propaganda. So it's not just the things that appear on Fox News or whatever the sources are that are worrying you, but it's coming to grips, meditative thinking, coming to grips with your whole outlook to the world, so that you're not enamored by those things like success, like popularity, these things that lead you to want to follow some propagandistic message. That's without people having a certain set of soul-destroying myths in their head, it's not going to be easy to get for propagandists to go to work. It's really a huge territory that propaganda covers the world's view.
Great. The next sentence is in the back.
Yeah, Nick Ogle. Can you comment shortly on what you perceive to be the difference of the propagandee experiencing news information on a computer screen in comparison to print newspaper as it was primarily during Ellul's day?
Yeah, I think both of them could be very influential, but I think there's much more opportunities to dilute the propagandee with imagery, with pictures, than with words. But that's some quantitative stuff going on there that I can't be too sure about, because you can have word pictures as well, and creating the whole of the British Empire and all the propaganda involved in that was word pictures. Well, they also had pictures, genuine pictures. So it's hard to decide, but one picture is worth 1,000 words, and I think pictures have a very, very strong influence.
In the corner here.
Just on your last comment, I would maybe alter that and say one picture can destroy 1,000 words. But I think if we think that removing Fox News is going to bring us an inch or a millimeter closer to some sort of freedom, that I think we need to read Ellul's Apocalypse, his Reason for Being, his critique of the new commonplaces. How many of here have read that? There's a profound critique of left, right, middle, you name it, because what we want, we are those people that want the simple answers. Right in this room, believe it or not, we're not the free and the brave, are we? Really, we need the miracle of revelation. We need humility. We need wisdom. I think that reason for being an apocalypse.
Well, I think David Gill actually said it very well when he said Jacques Ellul wrote many books, but they're really all chapters of one book. And you read one book, and I read The False Presence of the Kingdom, and I saw how in trying to combat propaganda, you can actually be engaging in counter-propaganda and not really getting anywhere. That the only way in which to engage the propagandist forces is to do it with charity, to understand their point of view, and not be so confrontational. Don't demonize them. Don't demonize them, but try to understand where they are, so that your response has a chance of being heard. You cut the essence of propaganda is monologue, not dialogue. So don't counter bad wrong propaganda, unethical propaganda, by using unethical propaganda of your own. That's, I would say that's true, even if only for the practical reason that if you look at the world around you and you see the corporate power, that any time in which you engage in some unethical counter propaganda, this will be trumpeted. What you're attacking will generally not get, you won't have the money to make people aware of what it is you're attacking. So it's a losing battle, both from your own soul and also from the effectiveness of it.
I'm sorry, but we are out of time. I see two more hands up. Dr. Bahani, did you have a quick comment?
Very quick question. How does the promulgation of the propaganda or the propagation of, say, the propaganda fit into this picture?
Well, very, very well. The propagation of the faith, I mean, was set up by a Catholic institution as a counter-Reformation thing. That's what you're talking about, isn't it?
Well, I'm talking about the fact that it used to be called the Holy Office.
It was called the propaganda. Yeah.
Today it's called the propaganda. It's
Yeah.
more modern, but that's what I'm saying.
So, to the extent,
And the present Pope was the chief executive.
yeah, to the extent, I come back to Ellul's definition in terms of power. To the extent that you are using the propagation of materials to gain power over others, that makes it your propaganda in a negative sense. But to the extent that you're trying to get a message that will ultimately free people, and if you're a Catholic, you believe that the institution is a help. Then
They came with a rifle, and if you didn't,
so did Protestants. I mean, I have a Protestant heritage as well as a Catholic heritage, and there was faults on both sides. Yeah, that's it. We're not talking about propaganda and guns. So.
It is a very interesting discussion, and I hope that you two can continue it. Maybe even others can join in sometime soon. But join me in thanking Randal for this.